Hello there, and welcome to Sleep with Stories. Tonight, we're not visiting a battlefield or a royal court. There will be no grand pronouncements, no pivotal decisions that change the course of history. Instead, we are going to a place much quieter, much closer. A single ordinary day in a city of impossible size and quiet anxieties. You have a full day ahead of you. Though, if we're being honest, you probably won't make it through this day with us. And that is perfectly all right. Before this London, morning truly begins, and before you most likely drift away. We'd be so grateful if you'd take a quiet moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps our little corner of the internet find other people who enjoy the gentle, boring side of history. And feel free to leave a comment, letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always a quiet joy to see where these stories travel. Now, close your eyes if you haven't already. Settle in. Let the sound of the rain be a gentle blanket. Let the rhythm of my voice be a steady, calming hand. There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. Just be here. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The first thing you are aware of is the gray. It's a soft, pearlescent light filtering through the window of your small room, a light that promises no sun, no brilliant blue, only a persistent, thoughtful drizzle. It's not a dramatic storm, but a quiet English. Rain that has settled in for the day, determined to make its presence felt. You can hear it, a constant, gentle shushing against the glass and the slate roof tiles. You're lying in bed, warm under a thick wool blanket and a heavy quilt, and the air in the room is cool. It carries that special kind of dampness that seems to get into your very bones, a feeling Londoners have perfected over centuries of practice. You shift, and the straw-filled mattress rustles beneath you, a dry, whispery sound in the damp morning. For a moment, you consider simply staying here, letting the world outside the window carry on with its business, but the day calls. There are ledgers to be balanced, or shelves to be stocked, or perhaps just a very important appointment with a pot of tea and a newspaper. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet meeting the cold, smooth floorboards. A shiver works its way up your spine. In the corner of the room, propped against the wall where you left it last night, is the cause of your current low-grade anxiety. It's new. It's continental. It's an umbrella. You bought it 2 days ago from a hopeful shopkeeper who spoke of its modern convenience. Now, in the quiet morning light, it looks less like a tool for convenience and more like a complicated sleeping bag. Its frame is made of whalebone, thin and surprisingly flexible. The fabric is a dark, tightly woven gingham made waterproof with a coating of oil that gives it a faint, not unpleasant linseed smell. The handle is a simple, polished cherry wood, smooth and cool to the touch. It is a marvel of engineering, and yet it feels terribly conspicuous. You've heard the stories, of course. Your grandfather used to talk about the philanthropist Jonas Henway, who nearly a century ago was the first man to habitually carry one through the streets of London. He was jeered at, pelted with rubbish. Cab drivers, the hackney coachmen, saw it as a direct threat to their livelihood. Who would pay for a covered carriage if they could simply walk between destinations, dry and untouched by the weather? They would flick their whips at him, trying to tear the fabric. To carry an umbrella was an act of defiance. It was a statement. And even now, decades later, that sentiment lingers. It is seen by many as an effeminate French affectation, unmanly, un-English. Why can't a man just wear a sturdy hat and a good woolen coat and face the elements with grim, stoic resolve, as his father and his father's father did? Historians still debate whether the most common waterproof fabric of this decade was treated with oil, wax, or some other closely guarded proprietary concoction. To you, it just feels new, and foreign. You get dressed slowly, pulling on Your woolen trousers, your starched shirt, your waistcoat. Each layer is a familiar comfort, a piece of the armor you wear to face the city. But today, there is a new, final accessory. The umbrella. You stand before a small, slightly warped mirror and practice holding it. You feel ridiculous, pompous even. You imagine the looks you'll receive on the street, the smirks, the head shakes from older gentlemen who see it as a sign of society's declining moral fiber. But then you look back at the window, at the rain sliding down the pane in silvery, meandering trails. You think of your best hat, the one you just had reblocked, and the thought of it getting soaked and misshapen is a small, sharp pain. You think of the damp chill that will cling to your coat all day, and so you make a decision. A small, personal, and deeply revolutionary decision. You will take the umbrella. It is, after all, just an umbrella. What's the worst that could happen? A few glares? A sarcastic cough? In London society, that's practically a standing ovation. You pick it up. It has a surprising weight, a sense of purpose. You are ready. You take a final, steadying breath. The air in your small flat tastes of cold tea and yesterday's coal smoke. With the umbrella held firmly in your hand, you unlatch your door and step out into the shared landing. The building is quiet. The scent of frying bacon and boiled cabbage drifts up from one of the floors below, a smell so familiar it's almost comforting. You descend the narrow, creaking staircase, your other hand trailing along the cool, slightly sticky wooden banister. Each step is a small echo in the stairwell, a countdown to your public debut with an umbrella. You reach the heavy front door, its paint chipped and faded, and for a moment you hesitate. This is the point of no return. Once you are on the street, you are committed. You pull the door open. A gust of cool, damp air greets you, carrying the complex scent of the city, wet cobblestones, horse manure, coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys, and the faint, sweet smell of a bakery somewhere down the block. You step onto the worn stone step, pull the door close behind you, and stand for a moment under the shelter of the building's overhang. Now is the moment. You fumble with the mechanism on the umbrella shaft. There's a small, brassy-tasting metal ring you have to slide. With a stiff click, it releases. You give it a push, and with a satisfying humph, the dark gingham canopy blossoms above your head. The sound is startlingly loud in the quiet street. The whalebone ribs creak as they settle into their full, taut extension. You are now encased in your own private, portable shelter. The gentle patter of the rain changes from a distant shush to a close rhythmic drumming on the fabric just above your head. It's a surprisingly intimate sound. You take your first steps away from the door and onto the pavement. The world looks different from under here. Your view is framed by the dark circle of the umbrella's edge. The sky is gone, replaced by your own personal, man-made firmament. You are a pioneer, an innovator, a person holding a stick with some cloth on it to stop the sky water from hitting your hat. You walk, your boots making solid, reassuring sounds on the wet stone. The street is waking up. A milkmaid, her face ruddy and tired, passes you with 2 large metal pails hanging from a wooden yoke across her shoulders. She doesn't even glance at your contraption, her focus entirely on her task. But then you see him. You catch the eye of a clerk from a neighboring firm, a man whose waistcoat is always impeccably clean. He is hurrying along, head down, his hat already looking a bit sad and wilted. He gives you a look that is a masterclass in silent judgment. A look that says, well, look what the French dragged in. You give him a small, tight-lipped nod and keep walking, your heart beating just a little bit faster. The great engineer Joseph Bazalgette's revolutionary sewer system is still a few years in the future, which means the streets of London are an experience. The rain you are so cleverly avoiding is washing a slurry of mud, ash, and other less identifiable filth into the gutters, you're not just dodging rain. You're dodging the collected sins of the city, now helpfully made liquid for easier transport. Your umbrella, you realize, isn't just protecting you from the clean water falling from the sky, but also from the dirty water being kicked up by the iron-shod wheels of a passing omnibus, and from anything that might be unceremoniously tossed. From an upper-story window, it's a shield, a terribly stylish, controversial shield. It's difficult to say with certainty how much of the disdain for the umbrella was genuine social conservatism, and how much was simply a proxy for a deeper English suspicion of all things French. To the man who just glared at you, it likely all felt like the same thing. Ahead you see a small, ragged boy, no older than 10, dart into the street. He's a crossing sweeper. He holds a crude broom made of twigs, and for the price of a halfpenny, he will vigorously sweep a path for you through the thickest mud and mire so that your shoes and trouser cuffs remain respectable. It's a strange and particular London. Profession, a tiny enterprise born of mud. From beneath your umbrella, you watch as he clears a path, or a wealthy-looking man in a fine top hat, who tosses him a coin without breaking his stride. The boy snatches it from the air, his eyes already scanning for his next customer. You, however, do not need his services. You can simply hold your umbrella a little lower, angle it against the spray of a passing cart, and navigate the messy street with a newfound, and perhaps undeserved, sense of grace. You feel a strange mixture of guilt and superiority as you pass the boy, your boots staying remarkably clean. You are an island of dryness in a sea of damp, English disapproval. And the day has only just begun. You continue on your way, the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the gingham, a constant companion. The cherrywood handle of your umbrella feels solid and dependable in your palm, a point of anchor in the swirling chaos of the London street. The initial self-consciousness is beginning to fade, replaced by a quiet, smug satisfaction. You are dry. Everyone else is, to varying degrees, not. You pass a man whose impressive mutton chop sideburns seem to be drooping in the damp, collecting moisture like two sad, furry sponges. He glares at your umbrella as if it has personally insulted his ancestors. You, in your dome of dryness, offer him a look of what you hope is polite sympathy, but which probably reads as insufferable smugness. It's a fine line to walk. The street is a symphony of noise. The clatter of hundreds of horseshoes on stone, the rumble of iron-rimmed carriage wheels, the distant, mournful clang of a church bell marking the hour, and the constant hum of human voices. Hawkers shout their wares from the pavement, their cries piercing the din. Hot eels, get your hot jellied eels. One man yells, his voice raspy. You see him tending a small, steaming pot over a charcoal brazier, the smell sharp and fishy. Nearby, a woman sells lavender in small, fragrant bunches, a tiny pocket of floral sweetness in the city's complex and often challenging aromatic tapestry. One of the strangest cultural quirks you've encountered is the sheer variety of things sold on the street, from live birds to secondhand teeth. The hot eel vendor seems to be doing a surprisingly brisk trade for this time of morning. You make a mental note to stick to toast out. Your destination this morning is a bookshop in one of the covered arcades, a recent and fashionable innovation. These arcades are long, narrow passages lined with expensive shops, their glass roofs protecting wealthy patrons from the very weather you are currently defeating with technology. It is a bit like a street that has been brought indoors, tamed and civilized. There's an irony in using your new umbrella to walk to a place specifically designed to make umbrellas unnecessary. But the journey is part of the experience, a small test of your modern convictions. Historians have long debated the precise atmospheric cocktail of a true London fog, or pea souper, questioning what proportion was natural river mist versus the thick, yellow, sulfurous smoke belched out by tens of thousands of coal fires. Today, thankfully, it is only rain, clean and simple, but the air still has a gritty, coal-dusted taste to it. Navigating a crowded pavement with an open umbrella requires a surprising degree of skill and spatial awareness. It's a delicate, unspoken ballet. You must constantly adjust its height and angle to avoid clashing with your fellow pedestrians, or worse, poking someone in the eye. You narrowly miss the bonnet of a stout woman who is navigating her own path with the grim determination of a battleship. She cuts loudly, a sound of pure, condensed disapproval. You murmur an apology, feeling your ears grow warm. This is the real trial of the umbrella bearer, not the open mockery, but the subtle, constant negotiation of public space. It's a social puzzle. One false move and you've become a public nuisance. Get it right and you glide through the city, an untouchable. Master of your environment, you're beginning to suspect most people just can't be bothered with the effort. Preferring the simple, stoic misery of getting wet, it's certainly less complicated. You pass the street you walked down earlier, remembering the disapproving clerk. You wonder if his waistcoat has survived the journey. Before you reach the grand arcade, you decide a cup of coffee is in order. The damp has a way of sinking deep into your bones, and the thought of something hot and bitter is deeply appealing. You spot the familiar sign of a respectable coffee house just ahead, a simple, painted board hanging above a door with large, clean windows. It's a refuge, a place of warmth and steam and the smell of roasted beans. The challenge, you realize as you approach, is the transition. How does one go from being a person with an open umbrella outside to a person with a closed, dripping umbrella inside? There's no elegant way to do it. You stand by the door for a moment, fumbling with the mechanism again, feeling as graceful as a bear trying to fold laundry. The canopy collapses with a wet sigh, showering your boots and trousers with the collected rain. You give it a few vigorous shakes, sending a spray of water onto the already soaked pavement, and earning another sharp look from a passing gentleman. You pull open the heavy wooden door and step inside. The change is immediate and profound. A wave of warm, humid air envelops you, thick with the rich, earthy smell of coffee, damp wool, and melting beeswax from a few lit candles. The noise of the street is instantly muted, replaced by the low murmur of conversation, the clink of ceramic, cups on saucers, and the rustle of turning newspaper pages. The room is paneled in dark wood, gleaming softly in the gaslight. A large fire crackles in the hearth, casting a flickering golden glow over the scene. Several men are scattered around the room at small tables, some alone with a paper, others in quiet conversation. You feel a dozen pairs of eyes briefly register your entrance, taking in your damp coat and your conspicuous folded umbrella. You find a stand near the door, a sort of large ceramic pot filled with sand, clearly intended for wet umbrellas. It's a thoughtful, modern convenience. You place yours in the pot alongside two others. You are not, it seems, the only pioneer in here. A quiet sense of solidarity settles over you. The coffee houses of your time are evolving. They are now longer the chaotic penny universities of the last century, filled with raucous political debate. Instead, they are becoming more sober, respectable establishments for businessmen, clerks, and professionals to read the latest news and conduct quiet commerce away from the noise of the pub. You make your way to the counter, the floorboards, groaning slightly under your weight. You order a coffee, and the proprietor, a man with a magnificent, well-waxed mustache, nods and turns to a large, steaming silver urn dot. You take your cup to a small, empty table in the corner. The coffee is hot, black, and bracingly bitter. You cradle the warm ceramic in your hands, the heat seeping into your chilled fingers. From your vantage point, you can survey the room. At the table next to yours, two men are leaning over a shipping ledger, their voices a low, serious drone. Across the room, an older man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose is diligently reading a newspaper. You notice the paper is held in a peculiar wooden frame, a long rod with a clamp at the top. This is a common practice designed to keep the pages clean and, more importantly, to stop patrons from simply walking off with the house copy. It is a wonderfully English solution, trusting but with built-in physical proof of that distrust. It remains a matter of some debate among sociologists just how much of the talk in these establishments was high-minded business and how much was simply gossip about the weather and the shocking price of figs. Judging by the solemn expressions, you'd assume they were all single-handedly preventing the collapse of the global economy, one sip of coffee at a time. You take another slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. The small anxieties of the morning begin to melt away, leaving you in a state of quiet, caffeinated peace. The warmth of the coffee house has lulled you into a state of pleasant inertia. You could sit here for hours, nursing your empty cup, listening to the rain and the fire and the low murmur of important men discussing important things. But the day and your list of errands pulls at you. You take one last deep breath of the coffee-scented air and push yourself to your feet. The act of standing up feels like a great effort. You retrieve your coat, which has steamed itself into a state of profound dampness by the fire, and make your way back to the umbrella stand by the door. Your gingham companion is waiting, looking sad and slick in the ceramic pot. Picking it up, you realize it is now substantially heavier, logged with the water it so nobly shed. It drips a small, apologetic puddle onto the floor as you carry it to the door. You are a walking hazard, a one-man mobile swamp. You pull the door open and step back into the London gray. The air feels shockingly cold after the manufactured warmth of the coffee house, and your own breath plumes in a white cloud before you. The street seems to have grown louder and more frantic in the short time you were inside. The rhythm of the city has accelerated. A drayman is shouting at his enormous, patient horse, his voice swallowed by the general din. The rain has not lessened its resolve. If anything, it seems to be falling with a renewed, almost cheerful persistence. You find a small patch of pavement and once again perform the awkward ritual of opening the umbrella. The hoof of the canopy is just as satisfying as before, and the immediate cessation of rain on your hat is a small recurring miracle. You are back in your private bubble, your portable kingdom of dryness. You set off again, this time towards the Burlington Arcade. As you walk, you realize your umbrella is not just a shield, but a social signal. Other umbrella carriers, and you notice there are a few more now, as the day wears on exchange a subtle, fleeting glance of shared experience. It's a silent acknowledgement. Yes, you too have chosen convenience over convention. Good day to you, fellow modern, men without them, huddled under doorways or striding grimly on with water dripping from their hat brims. Look at you with a mixture of envy and scorn. You've upset the natural order of things, the shared misery that binds Londoners together. It's a very particular kind of social transgression, like wearing your finest clothes on a Tuesday for no reason at all. You turn a corner and there is the entrance to the arcade. It is an elegant, cream-colored facade, a neoclassical promise of civilized commerce. It feels like a portal to another world. The major historical fact of the day is that these arcades were a revolution in retail. They were, in essence, the world's first shopping malls, long, straight, glass-roofed streets where the wealthy could promenade and purchase luxury goods without ever being troubled by rain, mud, or the unpleasant realities of the common thoroughfare. And to maintain this air of refined tranquility, they had their own private police force. As you approach the entrance, you see one of them. He is a beetle, a tall, imposing figure in a magnificent top hat and a long, caped coat. His job is to enforce the arcade's very specific list of rules, and you, with your dripping, open umbrella, are about to become his business. Historians aren't entirely sure if the beetle's primary role was to prevent actual crime or simply to maintain an atmosphere of exclusive, quiet luxury by intimidating the riffraff. Looking at this fellow's stern face, you suspect it was a healthy mix of both. He stands perfectly still, a statue of decorum, his gaze sweeping over the approaching shoppers. His expression suggests he is constantly disappointed in what he sees. He is paid to judge you, and he is very good at his job. You approach the arcade entrance, feeling like a student about to be reprimanded by the headmaster. The beetle's eyes lock onto your umbrella. He doesn't move, but one of his eyebrows arches slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that conveys a universe of meaning. It says, you cannot possibly be thinking of bringing that thing in here while it is deployed. You obediently stop just shy of the covered entrance and begin the now familiar, clumsy process of collapsing your portable roof. It folds with a wet, squelching sound, and you give it a shake, trying to dislodge the worst of the water before you cross the threshold. The beetle watches this performance with an air of profound patience, the kind reserved for toddlers and small, misbehaving animals. He looks at your umbrella as if it were a live badger you were attempting to smuggle into a tea party. Once the umbrella is folded and pointed safely towards the ground, you are permitted to enter. You step past the beetle, offering a small, deferential nod and cross from the wet, gray, noisy world into the calm, dry, hushed sanctuary of the arcade. The air inside is still and warm, scented with leather, beeswax polish, and the faint, expensive perfume worn by the patrons. The floor is made of smooth, polished flagstones that softly reflect the light from the gas lamps and the long, arched glass roof high above. The roof turns the dreary gray daylight into a soft, even, milky luminescence, casting no sharp shadows. It is preternaturally quiet. The rules are being obeyed. There is no shouting, no whistling, and certainly no hurrying. It is a temple dedicated to the placid worship of expensive things. You walk slowly down the long, narrow corridor, your dripping umbrella now a distinct liability. You try to hold it away from your body, acutely aware of the small trail of drips you are leaving on the pristine floor. You are marking your territory like a badly behaved dog. The shops on either side are small, their windows exquisitely arranged with goods designed to tempt. You see a tobacconist with cigars stacked like cordwood, a jeweler whose diamonds glitter fiercely under the gaslight, a glover with kidskin gloves in every conceivable shade. There are shops selling things of such breathtaking uselessness, silver-handled letter openers, ivory-backed hairbrushes, tortoiseshell snuff boxes that they can only be intended for people with too much money and far too much time. You feel a pang of longing, not for the items themselves, but for the kind of life where one might have a legitimate need for a dedicated silver asparagus dash server. Finally, you reach your intended destination, the bookshop. It is quiet, smelling richly of paper and old leather. You lean your damp umbrella against the exterior wall, hoping it won't leave a stain, and step inside. Books are everywhere, lining the walls from floor to ceiling in dark wood shelves. This was the golden age of the English novel. Literacy was on the rise, and authors like Mr. Dickens were publishing their work not as single, expensive volumes, but in cheap monthly installments. It was a marketing masterstroke, building suspense and making the stories accessible to a growing middle-class readership. Still, buying a book outright was a luxury. For many, the more common practice was to borrow from a circulating library. For an annual subscription, these libraries would lend you the latest 3-volume novels. exerting a powerful and often conservative influence over what got published. It remains difficult to quantify the exact influence these circulating libraries had on authors, and whether the need to satisfy their demand for safe, moralistic stories stifled more experimental forms of writing. You feel the social pressure of the shop, the need to appear thoughtful and well-read. You ostentatiously pick up a heavy volume of Greek philosophy, nodding sagely at the dense, unreadable text, before your eyes dart to a brightly colored paper-bound serial promising tales of adventure and intrigue on the high seas. That, you think, is probably much more your speed. You spend a good 20 minutes in the bookshop browsing. It's a peaceful refuge, a pocket of silence and thought in the bustling arcade. You run your fingers over the leather spines of the expensive, serious-looking books, feeling the embossed titles under your fingertips. You are performing the role of serious literary gentleman. In reality, you are mostly just enjoying the warmth and the smell of old paper. Eventually, you purchase a slim volume of poetry, something respectable but not too demanding, and a copy of the latest installment of a popular serialized novel, which you slide discreetly inside your coat. The shopkeeper, a thin man with ink stains on his fingers and a perpetually dusty coat, wraps your poetry book in brown paper and ties it with string, the whole transaction conducted in near silence. It feels less like a purchase and more like the adoption of a small, quiet pet dot. With your new reading material secured, you step back out into the hushed elegance of the arcade. Your umbrella is still, leaning where you left it, a damp and slightly pathetic figure. As you pick it up, you notice a small, dark puddle has formed on the pristine flagstones beneath it. You feel a flush of shame, as if you've committed a terrible social faux pas. You quickly move away from the scene of the crime, trying to look as innocent as possible. As you walk back towards the entrance, you pass a glover's shop again. In the window, you see a display of umbrella gloves. This is a peculiar and very specific item. Sturdy leather gloves with an extra long, reinforced gauntlet on one arm, designed specifically to protect a gentleman's sleeve and cuff from the rainwater that inevitably runs down the shaft of a closed, wet umbrella. The fact that a product like this even exists tells you everything you need to know. The umbrella is not just an accessory. It's an entire ecosystem of related anxieties and solutions. It's a problem that has generated its own small economy. You reach the end of the arcade, preparing to re-enter the real world. The same beadle is on duty, his expression unchanged. He seems less like a man and more like a permanent architectural feature of the building. He gives your folded umbrella a look that seems to say, and now you're taking it back out into the world. Good riddance. You step past him, out from under the grand glass roof and into the open air. The rain is still falling, a steady, determined drizzle. It feels as if it has been raining forever and will continue to rain forever. You perform the now practiced maneuver of opening your umbrella, the hoomph of the canopy a familiar and welcome sound. You are once again in your private sanctuary, shielded from the elements. The noise of the street rushes back in, a sudden, chaotic wave of sound after the curated silence of the arcade. The major historical fact of this section is a subtle one, embedded in the very fabric of your journey. The sharp distinction between the chaotic, dirty, public street and the clean, orderly, private arcade reflects a profound Victorian obsession with classification and control. This was an era that sought to tame nature, to regulate society, to draw clear lines between the public and the private, the respectable and the unrespectable, the clean and the dirty. The arcade is a perfect physical manifestation of this impulse, a piece of the city carved out and scrubbed clean of all its messy, unpredictable realities. Historians continue to debate whether this impulse for order was a genuine quest for civic improvement, or a deep-seated fear of the urban chaos that industrialization had unleashed. As you stand on the wet pavement, looking back at the serene, controlled world of the arcade, you can feel the appeal of both. It's nice to have a place to escape the mud, but there's a life and an energy to the street that the arcade, for all its elegance, sorely lacks. You turn your back on the temple of quiet consumerism and head back into the glorious democratic mess of it all. Your next task is a simple one: lunch. The coffee and the brief intellectual exertion in the bookshop have left you feeling hollow. You decide against the formal, stuffy chop houses with their starched tablecloths and intimidating waiters. You want something simple, cheap, and hot. Just the place. You begin to walk, your umbrella held high, navigating the crowded pavements with growing confidence. You've mastered the subtle dip and sway required to avoid colliding with other pedestrians. You are no longer an apprentice of the umbrella. You're a master, or at least a reasonably competent journeyman. You feel a sense of pride that is entirely out of proportion with the actual achievement dot as you walk. Your attention is caught by the shop windows. The Industrial Revolution has made mass-produced goods more available than ever before, and shopkeepers are learning the art of display. You pass a haberdashery with a pyramid of spools of brightly colored thread, a chemist with enormous glass jars filled with mysterious colored liquids, and a hardware shop with a formidable array of gleaming brass knobs, hinges, and locks. It is a visual feast, a testament to the sheer quantity of stuff the world now contains. You pause in front of a taxidermist's window. It's a grimly fascinating display. A stoat is frozen in the act of pouncing on a terrified-looking field mouse. A large owl with luminous glass eyes stares out at the street with unnerving intensity. In the corner, a kitten wearing a tiny bonnet pushes another kitten in miniature prom. This tableau, intended to be charming and whimsical, is one of the most unsettling things you have ever seen. The Victorians' relationship with sentimental death was, to put it mildly, complicated. The desire to preserve and display the dead in cute, human-like poses is a cultural quirk that modern sensibilities find, frankly, a bit creepy. You finally arrive at your destination. It is not a grand establishment. It is, in fact, a cart. A pie man's cart, to be precise, parked on a busy street corner. A small tin chimney on top of the cart releases a thin stream of steam and smoke, carrying the deeply comforting smell of hot pastry and savory gravy into the damp air. The pie man himself is a stout, cheerful-looking fellow in a dirty apron. He presides over a large, heated metal container with several compartments, from which he dispenses his wares. This is the fast food of your era. It's quick, it's cheap, and it's hot. The major historical fact here is the central role of street food in feeding London's massive working population. For many, a small flat might not have proper cooking facilities, making vendors like this pieman an essential part of daily life. The quality and contents of these pies were, however, a subject of perennial and anxious speculation. The infamous demon barber Sweeney Todd, who supposedly baked his victims into pies, was a lurid folk tale, but it tapped into a very real public. Anxiety about what, exactly, was in the food you bought from a stranger on a street corner. You approach the cart, close your umbrella with a final wet flourish, and order a simple meat pie. The pie man expertly fishes one out with a pair of tongs and places it on a small square of paper. It's hot enough to warm your hands through the paper. It costs a single penny. You hand over the coin and retreat to the shelter of a nearby awning to eat your lunch. The pastry is flaky on top, a bit soggy on the bottom, and the filling is a hot, savory, slightly mysterious mince. It is, you decide, absolutely delicious. As you eat, you watch the river of humanity flow past. A man with a sandwich board advertising a patent medicine that promises to cure everything from gout to a broken heart. A group of young women from a nearby factory laughing and talking loudly as they share a bag of roasted chestnuts. An omnibus pulled by two tired-looking horses lurching to a halt to pick up passengers. Each person is a story, a life unfolding in the gray, damp city. And you are here, a quiet observer, a man with a book, a new umbrella, and a hot pie. For this one small moment, everything is perfectly, wonderfully ordinary. You finish your pie, crumpling the greasy paper into a small ball and tucking it into your coat pocket. Littering is common, but you're feeling particularly civic-minded. Today, the warmth of the food has fortified you against the persistent dampness. You glance up at the sky, a uniform sheet of gray. The rain has softened to a fine mist, but the air is still heavy with moisture. It's the kind of weather that seeps into your thoughts, making them feel slow and heavy. Time to walk it off. You redeploy your umbrella, now familiar and comforting. Ritual, and set off without a specific destination in mind. You are simply going to wander for a while, to lose yourself in the labyrinth of the city. You turn off the main thoroughfare and into a warren of smaller, quieter streets. Here, the noise of the city recedes, replaced by more intimate sounds, the distant cry of a baby, the muffled clatter of a pot in a kitchen, the lonely notes of a piano being played inexpertly in a parlor. The buildings are a jumble of brick and timber, leaning against each other for support like old friends. The air smells of damp brick, wet coal dust, and 1,000 forgotten histories. It's in these back streets that you feel the true age of the city. The grand avenues feel new and planned, but these crypt lanes feel ancient and organic, as if they grew rather than being built. You pass a small, grimy window behind which a cobbler is working. He has a candle burning on his workbench, even. In the middle of the day, the light casting deep shadows in his small shop. He is bent over a worn-out boot, his face a mask of concentration, his hands moving with a practiced, economical grace. He doesn't look up as you pass. He is in his own world, a world of leather and wax and males. Further down the lane, you see a flash of color. A woman is leaning out of a second-story window, carefully tending to a small window box. It's full of bright red geraniums, a startling, defiant splash of life against the monochrome backdrop of the wet brick. She sees you looking and gives you a small, weary smile before retreating back inside. It's a fleeting moment of connection, a reminder of the small, private lives being lived out behind these stern uniform facades. Find yourself in a small, forgotten churchyard. It's a patch of green, dotted with leaning, moss-covered headstones. The grass is long and wet, and the air is still and silent save for the gentle dripping of water from the leaves of a large yew tree. You close your umbrella and lean it against the old iron fence. The quiet here feels too profound to be shielded from. You wander among the graves, reading the faded inscriptions. Many are so worn by time and acid rain that they are completely illegible. You can just make out a name here, a date there. Ebenezer Smith, beloved husband. Sarah Jones, gone but not forgotten. Each stone marks a life, a story that has now been almost entirely erased. The major historical fact of this quiet moment is the dire state of London cemeteries. The city's population had exploded, and its ancient parish churchyards were literally overflowing. This crisis led to the creation of the magnificent 7 large, private, park-like cemeteries built on the outskirts of the city, turning burial from a cramped urban necessity into a grand, landscaped, suburban affair. This small, crowded churchyard is a relic of the old way, a place of quiet decay. As you stand there, a strange cultural tidbit comes to mind. It's the sin eater, a figure from rural folklore, though tales of them persist even in the cities. Hidden corners. A sin eater was a person who, for a small fee, would absorb the sins of a recently deceased person by eating a loaf of bread and drinking a bowl of ale laid out on their chest. By consuming the meal, they were believed to be consuming the deceased, the transgressions, allowing the soul to pass peacefully into the afterlife. It was a fringe, often condemned practice, a piece of folk magic surviving in an age of steam and iron. It is difficult to know how much of this was genuine belief versus a comforting ritual for the bereaved. Standing here among the silent stones, surrounded by the forgotten dead, the idea doesn't seem quite so strange. It's a desire for closure, for a final, tidy accounting. You look at a particular leathered stone, its inscription completely gone, and wonder what sins its occupant left behind, and if anyone was there to eat them. The thought sends a small, not unpleasant shiver down your spine. You leave the quiet churchyard behind, collecting your umbrella from its post against the fence. The brief interlude of peace has made the return to the street feel jarring. You decide to head towards the river. There is always something happening on the Thames. It is the city's great artery, its source of commerce, life, and a considerable amount of its filth. You navigate your way out of the maze of back streets and onto a wider road that slopes gently down towards the water. The sounds and smells change as you get closer. The air becomes thicker, carrying the scent of mud, brine, and tar. The noise is more industrial, the clang of metal on metal from a shipyard, the hoot of a steam tug's whistle, the creak and groan of mooring ropes. You emerge onto the Victoria Embankment, a grand, sweeping project still partially under construction. It is a monumental feat of civil engineering, designed to modernize the city's waterfront, create a new thoroughfare, and, most importantly, house a massive new sewer interceptor. This project, which you can see in its various stages of completion, is the physical embodiment of the Victorian drive to impose order on chaos. The major historical fact is that the embankment was built on reclaimed land, narrowing the Thames and channeling its flow, which had the unintended, or perhaps intended, consequence of flushing the city's sewage downstream much more efficiently. It was a triumph of sanitation and urban planning, but it also destroyed the ancient, muddy, chaotic waterfront that had existed for centuries, a world of watermen, mudlarks, and ramshackle riverside inns. Progress, you reflect, is rarely tidy. Find a spot to stand and look out over the water. The river is a churning, brownish-gray expanse, its surface pockmarked by the steady rain. A flotilla of small boats crisscrosses the water, heavy-laden barges moving slowly with the tide. Nimble watermen and their small skiffs rowing passengers from one bank to the other, and a puffing, self-important steam ferry belching black smoke. Into the gray sky. The sheer density of traffic is astonishing. It's a liquid highway, more crowded and chaotic than any road. You watch as a barge piled high with coal navigates past a sailboat, the two vessels missing each other by what seems like inches. The men on board shout at each other, their words lost in the wind, but their gestures are universally understood, holding your umbrella against the river breeze, which is stronger here. You notice the mudlarks. They are mostly children, ragged and filthy, scavenging along the river's edge at low tide. They are looking for anything of value that might have washed ashore or been dropped from the ships. Bits of coal, scraps of metal, lost coins, anything they can sell for a few pennies. It is a hard, grim, and dangerous existence. One of the children, a girl with a fierce, smudged face, looks up and catches you watching. She stares at you, her expression unreadable, a mix of defiance and weariness. You are a man with a fancy umbrella, a book in your pocket, and time to simply stand and watch. You are from different worlds, even though you are separated by only a few yards of wet stone and mud. It's a sobering reminder of the chasms that exist within the city. Scholars still struggle to accurately estimate the number of people who made their living from the river's refuse, but it was a significant, if invisible, part of London's economy. The site is a stark contrast to the elegant shops of the Burlington Arcade. London is not one city, but many, all layered on top of each other, their boundaries constantly shifting and occasionally, as now, becoming uncomfortably visible. Feel a sudden, sharp chill that has nothing to do with the rain. You turn away from the river, the image of the mudlark's face lingering in your mind. The grand ambition of the embankment seems a little less triumphant now, more like a decorative border papered over a much more complicated and desperate reality. The rain, which had been a gentle mist, begins to fall with more conviction again, as if it has made up its mind. The drumming on your umbrella becomes a little louder, a little more insistent. It's time to move indoors again. You have one more errand to run, a social obligation you have been quietly dreading all day. You have to visit your aunt, lives in a respectable, if slightly faded, square in Bloomsbury. It's a considerable walk, so you decide to indulge in a modern luxury, public transport. You make your way to a nearby stop for the horse-drawn omnibus. These vehicles are the workhorses of the city's transport network. They are large, heavy, box-like carriages pulled by two sturdy horses, with seating inside and, for the cheaper fares, on the exposed roof. You wait, huddled under your umbrella, along with a small crowd of other damp Londoners. There's a silent, resentful camaraderie among people waiting for an omnibus in the rain. Everyone is a little bit miserable, and everyone is pretending not to be. When the omnibus finally arrives, lurching to a halt with a groan of springs and a jangle of harnesses, there is a polite but determined scrum for the door. Getting on is an art form. You must quickly fold your wet umbrella while simultaneously trying to board a moving vehicle and not get trampled. You manage it with a singular lack of grace, collapsing your umbrella into a dripping spear and stumbling up the steps into the carriage's interior. It is cramped. You squeeze onto a narrow wooden bench, your knees almost touching those of the person opposite you. The air inside is thick and stale, a potent cocktail of wet wool, damp leather, and unwashed humanity. It's the smell of public life. Your fellow passengers are a cross-section of the city's middle class. A stern-looking woman with a large shopping basket, a young clerk clutching a leather portfolio, a tired-looking man who may have already been to the pub for his lunch. No one speaks. No one makes eye contact. This is one of the great unspoken rules of the omnibus. You must pretend that you are completely alone, despite being pressed up against several strangers. The only sound is the rumble of the wheels, the clop of the horses, and the occasional sharp rap on the ceiling from the conductor, signaling the driver to stop. You sit with your wet umbrella held vertically between your knees, where it creates a small, ever-expanding puddle on the floor, which is already covered in a layer of muddy straw. You receive several disapproving glances for this. Apparently, your umbrella is only socially acceptable when it's open and keeping you dry. When closed and wet, it's a public menace. You can't win. The major historical fact here is that this omnibus system, pioneered by George Shillabere in 1829, was a social revolution. For the first time, it allowed the burgeoning middle classes to live in suburbs and commute into the city for work, fundamentally reshaping London's geography and social fabric. It was the beginning of the end for the city as a place where most people both lived and worked. The omnibus was the vehicle that began to stretch London out, creating the sprawling metropolis it was becoming. It was, in its own slow, lumbering way, the engine of suburbanization. You look out the smeared, steamed-up window as the carriage rattles along. The city passes by in a wet, blurry stream of brick and stone. The journey is uncomfortable, awkward, and slow, but it is also a small miracle of logistics and social engineering. And most importantly, it is taking you to your aunt's, which you are still not sure is a good thing. The journey to Bloomsbury is a slow, jolting crawl. The omnibus stops and starts, the horses straining, the whole vehicle groaning in protest. At one stop, a man gets on carrying a large caged parrot. The parrot, looking distinctly unimpressed by the weather, lets out a single piercing squawk that makes everyone jump. The man apologizes to no one in particular, and the carriage lapses back into its customary awkward silence, now with the added element of a large, judgmental bird. The Victorians' fondness for exotic pets, a direct result of the expanding British Empire, meant that public spaces were often enlivened or plagued by unexpected fauna. It's a strange cultural tidbit, the idea that a trip across town might involve sharing your seat with a monkey or a macaw. Finally, the conductor shouts your stop. You extract yourself from the cramped interior, mumbling apologies as your wet umbrella brushes against a fellow passenger's trousers. You step down onto the pavement and the omnibus rumbles away, leaving you in the relative quiet of a leafy London square. Bloomsbury is more refined, more academic than the bustling commercial districts you've been in. The buildings are elegant, Georgian townhouses, their brick facades softened by the rain. Many have been converted into boarding houses or the offices of solicitors and publishers. It's the intellectual heart of the city, a place of libraries, museums, and quiet contemplation. It feels a world away from the mudlarks of the Thames. You walk towards your aunt's house, your footsteps echoing in the quiet square. You redeploy your umbrella one last time, the gesture now second nature. The rain is soft here, hushed by the tall trees in the central garden. You reach number 17, a handsome, if slightly peeling, townhouse. You stand at the bottom of the stone steps, gathering your resolve. You fold your umbrella carefully, shake it out, and tuck it under your arm. You ascend the steps and raise your hand to the large brass door knocker, which is shaped like a lion's head. You hesitate. Visiting your aunt is always an ordeal. She is a formidable woman, a gatekeeper of family propriety, and a connoisseur of your personal failings. You take a deep breath and let the knocker fall. The sound is loud and definitive, and the quiet street. There's no turning back now. After a few moments, you hear the sound of bolts being drawn, and the door swings open to reveal a young housemaid in a crisp white apron and cap. She looks at you, then at the dripping umbrella under your arm, and her expression tightens almost imperceptibly. "Good afternoon," you say, with more confidence than you feel. The maid simply nods and steps aside to let you in. You are ushered into a dark, cool hallway. The air inside smells of beeswax, potpourri, and a faint, underlying scent of disapproval. It is the signature scent of your aunt's home. The maid takes your wet coat and hat, handling them with the care one might afford to a biohazard. She looks at your umbrella. "I shall place this in the scullery to dry, sir," she says, her tone suggesting this is a great and unusual inconvenience. You hand it over. You feel as if you have just surrendered your weapon before entering hostile territory. The major historical fact to consider in this moment is the intricate and rigid hierarchy of the Victorian middle-class household. Every object, every action, had its proper place. A wet umbrella did not belong in the front hall with the clean, dry coats of esteemed visitors. It belonged in the scullery, the damp, functional heart of the house's service area. Along with the wet mops and dirty dishes, the maid's reaction is not personal. It is a defense of domestic order against the messy intrusion of the outside world. Historians often debate the psychological impact of living within such a rigidly structured domestic environment, and whether it fostered a sense of security or a state of perpetual, low-grade anxiety about putting a metaphorical foot. Wrong. As you stand in the hall, waiting to be announced, you are definitely feeling the anxiety. You smooth down your waistcoat and prepare for your audience. The housemaid disappears down a long, dark corridor with your offending umbrella, leaving you alone in the hall. You can hear the slow, heavy tick-tock of a grandfather clock from somewhere deeper in the house. It sounds less like it's marking time and more like it's passing judgment. The hall is decorated in a style you can only describe as cluttered solemnity. Dark wallpaper, dark furniture, and several severe-looking portraits of ancestors who all seem to be disappointed in you. You feel an overwhelming urge to check if your posture is correct. After a few agonizingly long minutes, the maid returns. "Mrs. Pemberton will see you in the drawing room," she announces, and then leads the way. You follow her to a pair of large, imposing double doors. She opens them, and you step inside. The drawing room is a fortress of Victorian taste. It is crowded with furniture. Heavy velvet curtains block out most of the gray daylight. A large, ornate fireplace dominates one wall, though it is unlit, a black void, and every available surface is covered with photographs and silver frames, porcelain figurines, and small, embroidered cushions. The air is still and heavy, thick with the scent of dried flowers and old upholstery. And there, in the center of it all, sitting bolt upright in a high-backed armchair, is your Aunt Beatrice is a small woman, but she possesses a gravitational pull that warps the room around her. She is dressed in black silk, the traditional mourning dress she has not abandoned in the 10 years since your uncle's passing. Her gray hair is pulled back so tightly it seems to be pulling her face into a permanent expression of mild alarm. She gestures to a small, hard-looking chair opposite hers. "Nigel," she says. Her voice is thin but surprisingly resonant. "You are looking damp." It is not a statement of fact. It is an accusation. You sit on the designated chair, which seems to have been designed specifically to discourage lounging. "It is raining, Aunt," you offer, as if this is a novel piece of information. She gives a small, sharp nod. A man of good constitution does not allow himself to be troubled by a little weather. The conversation, as it always does, proceeds along a well-worn path. She asks about your work in a tone that suggests she finds commerce vulgar. She inquires after your health in a way that implies you are not taking adequate care of yourself. She brings up the daughter of a friend, a perfectly suitable young woman whom you have been studiously avoiding for months. It is a masterful performance of social duty and passive aggression. The major historical fact here is the central role of the social call. This was not a friendly drop-in. It was a formal, ritualized interaction governed by strict rules of etiquette. A calling card had to be left. The visit had to be of a precise duration, no more than 20 minutes. Its purpose was to maintain the delicate web of social connections that held the middle and upper classes together. It was networking, but with tea and a much higher risk of being judged for using the wrong fork. During a lull in the interrogation, your aunt mentions a peculiar new trend she has heard about: spirit photography. This was a fad where photographers claimed to be able to capture images of ghosts and spirits on their photographic plates, often appearing as faint, translucent figures hovering behind the living subject. Perfect nonsense, of course, she says, her lips pursed. But Mrs. Albright from next door paid a guinea for a portrait and swears she can see her late husband's beard near her left shoulder. This cultural tidbit highlights the strange collision of technology and superstition in the Victorian era. The new scientific marvel of photography was almost immediately co-opted to provide proof of the supernatural. Scholars still analyze these photographs, debating whether they represent a genuine, widespread belief in ghosts, a desperate longing for connection with lost loved ones in an age of high mortality, or simply the work of clever charlatans preying on the bereaved. Your aunt, for her part, seems to view it as just another example of the world's growing foolishness. You suspect she'd be furious if your late uncle's spirit photobombed her dot the 20-minute mark. The socially acceptable duration for a formal call is approaching. You can feel it. The conversation has run its course, having covered the weather, your personal failings, and the spectral beards of neighbors. You begin the delicate process of extricating yourself. You shift slightly in your unforgiving chair. You clear your throat. Well, Aunt, I mustn't take up any more of your afternoon. You begin. She nods, accepting your departure as an inevitability, like the setting of the sun or the eventual heat death of the universe. She does not press you to stay. The ritual is complete. She rings a small silver bell on the table beside her, and the sound, clear and high, summons the maid with an almost supernatural speed. You stand up, your legs stiff from sitting in the mandated position of polite attention. It was a pleasure to see you, Aunt Beatrice. You lie. Do try to stay dry on your way home, Nigel, she says, which you understand is her version of goodbye and take care. You are escorted back into the hall by the silent maid. She retrieves your hat and still damp coat. She then disappears, again into the nether regions of the house, and returns with your umbrella. It is no longer dripping, but it feels cold and slightly clammy. She hands it to you with the same air of faint disgust, as if it is a dead fish she has been forced to. Store it in her kitchen. You are shown to the door, the bolts are drawn back, and you are released back into the wild. You step out onto the top step, pull the door closed behind you, and take your first breath of free, damp air. It feels wonderful. The rain has almost stopped now, reduced to a barely there drizzle, but you open your umbrella anyway. It feels like an act of defiance, a reassertion of your own identity after being submerged in your aunt's oppressive atmosphere. The humph of the canopy is the sound of freedom. You walk down the steps and away from the house, feeling your shoulders, which had been tensed up to your ears, begin to relax. You have survived. You wander aimlessly for a while, letting the rhythm of walking soothe your frayed nerves. You find yourself heading towards one of the city's great new green spaces, Regent's Park. The creation of these large public parks was a major feature of Victorian urban reform. The idea was that providing the working classes with access to fresh air, nature, and rational recreation would improve their moral and physical health, luring them away from the temptations of the pub and the gin palace. The parks were designed to be beautiful, but also to subtly guide behavior, with designated paths, formal flower beds, and prominent park keepers to enforce the rules. It was nature, but nature that had been tamed, tidied up, and told to behave itself. Historians often point to the park movement as a prime example of social control by design, an attempt to shape a better, more orderly society by shaping its environment. You enter the park, and the city's noise falls away once more. The vast green expanse of the lawns, slick and shimmering with rain, feels calming. The trees, their leaves heavy with water, stand like silent, patient sentinels. There are a few other people strolling the paths, a nanny pushing a perambulator, two gentlemen in deep conversation, a young couple walking a little too close together. You feel anonymous again, which is a profound relief. You fold up your umbrella as the rain has now officially given up and walk on, the wet metal and cloth a cool weight in your hand. The air is clean here, washed by the rain, smelling of wet earth and grass. It's the perfect antidote to your aunt's drawing room. You find an empty bench, wipe the rainwater from it with your hand, and sit down. You're just a man on a bench in a park, and for now, that is more than enough. You sit on the park bench for a long time, watching the world go by in slow motion. The sky above is beginning to break. Patches of a pale, watery blue appear between the bruised-looking gray clouds. The late afternoon sun, low and weak, manages to pierce through, casting long, soft shadows across the wet grass. The light transforms everything, turning the puddles on the gravel path into sheets of silver and making the raindrops clinging to the railings glitter like tiny diamonds. London, you reflect, is at its most beautiful when it is wet. A park keeper in a smart, dark uniform walks past, touching the brim of his hat to you in a gesture of formal acknowledgement. He moves with a slow, deliberate pace, his gaze sweeping the park for any signs of untoward behavior, unsupervised children, unleashed dogs, or, heaven forbid, unauthorized lounging on the grass. His presence is a quiet reminder that this is not wild nature, this is a carefully managed environment. You look down at your umbrella, resting on the bench beside you. It seems like a lifetime ago that you were standing in your room, nervously contemplating whether to take it out. It has been your companion all day, your shield, your social signifier, your personal source of low-grade anxiety. Now it just looks like a tool that has done its job. You decide it's time to head home. The day is winding down. The weak sunlight is already beginning to fade, and a chill is creeping back into the air. You stand up, your joints stiff from the damp bench, and begin the long walk back towards your lodgings. You choose to walk through a different set of streets, taking a route that leads you through some of the city's more affluent residential squares. Here, the houses are grander, the front steps are freshly scrubbed, and the brass knockers are polished to a brilliant shine. You see carriages pulling up to drop off ladies dressed for evening engagements, their silk dresses rustling as they hurry inside. Through the large, uncurtained windows, you catch glimpses of gaslit interiors, rooms filled with warmth, light, and the promise of a comfortable dinner. It's in one of these windows that you see it, a startling, almost shocking sight. A woman is standing in her drawing room, clearly visible from the street, practicing archery. She has a full-size longbow and is aiming an arrow at a target propped up against the far wall. This bizarre cultural tidbit is parlor archery, a fashionable and faintly ridiculous pastime for well-to-do Victorian women. It was seen as one of the few sports that was graceful and feminine enough for a lady to practice, promoting a good posture and a steady hand without any unseemly sweating or exertion. The idea of someone firing a potentially lethal projectile inside a room filled with delicate furniture and breakable china is, to your modern sensibilities, completely insane. But it speaks to a deep desire for activity and stimulation within the often stifling confines of the domestic sphere. The woman draws the bowstring back to her cheek, her face a mask of intense concentration. You watch mesmerized for a moment, before walking on, shaking your head in mild disbelief. The major historical fact of your walk home is the very existence of these distinct, purpose-built neighborhoods. The concept of zoning, of separating residential areas from commercial and industrial ones, was becoming deeply embedded in the city's structure. This separation, driven by the expansion of transport like the omnibus you rode earlier, created a city of discrete districts, each with its own character, class affiliation, and social rules. You can tell more about a person from their address than almost any other fact. It dictated who you met, where you shopped, and what was expected of you. Historians still grapple with the long-term consequences of this social stratification, and whether it created a more orderly, livable city or simply entrenched divisions and inequality. As you pass from a wealthy square into a more modest, mixed-use street, the transition is palpable. The houses get smaller, the shops reappear, and the air gets thicker with the smell of coal smoke and cooking. You are crossing an invisible but very real border. The sky is a deep, bruised purple by the time you reach your own street. The gas lamps have been lit, casting pools of golden, flickering light on the wet pavements. Their glow is soft and inviting, making the familiar street look magical and mysterious. The day's rain has washed the air clean, and the evening has a crisp, fresh feeling to it. The sounds of the city are changing too. The rumble of commercial traffic is fading, replaced by the clatter of homeward-bound carriages and the chime of a muffin man's bell, a lonely, musical sound in the twilight. You see him further down the street, a tray balanced on his head, calling out his wares to the houses as he passes. You are tired. It's a deep, bone-weary fatigue that comes from a day spent walking, navigating crowds, and managing the small, constant frictions of city life. Your feet ache, your coat still feels stubbornly damp, and your mind is full of the day's impressions. The bookshop, the pie man, the river, your aunt's oppressive drawing room, the woman with the bow and arrow. It feels like you have lived several different lives in the space of a single day. Your umbrella, held loosely in your hand, feels heavy now, a dead weight. Its job is done. As you approach your building, you see a familiar figure from this morning. The clerk with the impeccable way cut. He is just arriving home as well. You catch his eye across the street. His hat looks decidedly worse for wear, its shape slightly slumped. His coat bears the unmistakable dark patches of a thorough soaking. He looks at you, then at the dry, pristine state of your own hat, and then at the folded umbrella in your hand. He gives you a look that is no longer one of scorn or judgment. It is a look of pure, unadulterated envy. And then he does something remarkable. He gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod. It is a nod of concession, a nod of defeat, a nod that says, "You were right, I was wrong. My waistcoat is damp and my spirit is broken." You nod back, a magnanimous victor. You have won the unspoken, day-long battle of the umbrella. It is a small, petty, and deeply satisfying triumph. Reach your front door and let yourself in, the familiar scent of your building wrapping around you like a blanket. You climb the creaking stairs, each step a small protest. The major historical fact of this homecoming is the concept of home itself. For the Victorian middle class, the home was elevated to an almost sacred status. It was the separate sphere, a private sanctuary ruled by the angel in the house, the wife and mother, where a man could retreat from the harsh, competitive, and moral world of commerce and politics. This idealized vision of domestic bliss was promoted in countless books, poems, and articles, creating a powerful cultural standard that many families struggled to live up to. It is difficult to ascertain how many people genuinely experienced their home as a perfect refuge versus a place of its own unique pressures and disappointments. For you tonight, your small, simple room represents the peak of human civilization. It is a place to be warm, dry, and alone. You unlock your door and step inside. The room is dark and cold. The first thing you do is prop your victorious umbrella in the corner where it can rest and dry and prepare for its next battle with the elements. You light a candle, the small flame pushing back the shadows, and then you light the small coal fire in your grate. You coax it to life, and soon the gentle crackle and growing warmth begin to fill the small room. The day is over. You are home, with the fire crackling and a candle flickering on your small table. The room slowly transforms from a cold, dark box into a cozy haven. You shrug off your damp coat and hang it on a hook by the door. You kick off your tired, muddy boots. The relief is immense. You pad across the cold floorboards in your stockinged feet and light another candle, the doubling of the light making the room feel warmer and safer. You are enveloped in the simple, comforting smells of your own space, the coal smoke, the old wood of the floorboards, the faint, lingering scent of the book you were reading last night. You are hungry again. The street corner pie feels like a distant memory from another lifetime. You are in no mood for a complicated meal. You open your small pantry. The contents are modest: a loaf of bread, a small wedge of cheese, a slightly withered apple, and a jar of pickles. It is a bachelor's feast. You slice a few thick pieces of bread and cheese, arrange them on a plate with the apple, and pour yourself a glass of water. It is a simple, satisfying meal, eaten at your own table in your own time. As you eat, you look around your room. It is small and sparsely furnished, but it is yours. There is a narrow bed, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, a small wardrobe, this table, and one chair. On the wall, you have tacked up a single cheap print of a pastoral landscape, a patch of idealized green to counter the city's gray. After you've eaten, you pull your chair closer to the fire, the warmth a welcome comfort on your tired back. You retrieve the book you bought earlier, the slim volume of poetry. You unwrap it from its brown paper, the crinkling sound loud in the quiet room. You open it and begin to read by the combined light of the fire and the candle. The poems are about nature, about love, about the changing of the seasons. The language is formal and a little sentimental, but tonight it is exactly what you need. The rhythmic cadence of the verses is soothing, a gentle counterpoint to the city's chaotic symphony. The major historical fact here lies in the very act. You are performing, reading for pleasure alone in the evening. The dramatic increase in literacy rates throughout the 19th century was one of the era's most profound social transformations. This, combined with cheaper printing methods and better lighting, first with affordable candles, then gas, and eventually electricity, created a mass audience for literature. Reading became a primary form of evening entertainment, a way to travel the world, to experience romance and adventure, all from the comfort of one's own armchair. It fundamentally altered how people spent their leisure time and how they understood the world. It democratized storytelling. No longer was it solely the domain of the theater or the public storyteller. It was a private, personal experience. As you read, you think about the odd Victorian fascination with the language of flowers. This was a popular cultural craze where every type of flower was assigned a specific meaning, allowing people to send complex, coded messages through the simple act of giving a bouquet. A red rose meant passionate love, of course, but a yellow carnation signified disdain, and a sprig of basil conveyed hatred. An entire conversation could be had with a carefully selected nosegay. It was a system of communication that was both charmingly romantic and incredibly passive-aggressive, a perfect reflection of the era's social constraints. It's an obscure cultural tidbit that highlights the desire for emotional expression in a society that often prized repression. Historians still debate how widely this floral language was actually understood and used, or if it was mostly a fanciful notion sold by guidebook publishers. You look at the pastoral print on your wall, at its painted flowers, and wonder what coded message they might be sending. Probably something about being tired and wanting to go to bed. The fire settles into a steady, hypnotic glow, its warmth making your eyelids feel heavy. The poetry book rests open in your lap, the words beginning to blur slightly. The small room is filled with a comfortable, sleepy silence, punctuated only by the soft crackle of the coals and the distant, muted sounds of the city settling down for the night. You can hear the faint clip-clop of a lone horse, the faraway chime of a clock tower, the low murmur of your neighbors through the thin walls. These sounds, which during the day are part of the city's overwhelming noise, now feel like a gentle lullaby. They are a reminder that you are part of this vast, sprawling organism, but for now, you are safe and sheltered in your own small corner of it. You are not quite ready for sleep. You are in that pleasant, liminal state between wakefulness and slumber, your thoughts drifting like smoke. You replay the day's events in your mind, but they have lost their sharp edges. The disapproving glare of the clerk, the imposing presence of the beadle, The oppressive atmosphere of your aunt's drawing room, they all seem distant and slightly absurd now. Like scenes from a play you watched a long time ago. Your triumph with the umbrella feels less like a victory and more like a funny anecdote you might tell a friend. You remember the umbrella itself standing in the corner. You glance over at it. In the flickering firelight, it looks like a tall, thin, sleeping creature, its job done, its purpose fulfilled. It is no longer a symbol of French affectation or modern anxiety. It is just your umbrella, and you're glad you brought it with you. You think about the contrast between the places you visited today. The chaotic, vital energy of the street market versus the hushed, artificial reverence of the Burlington arcade. The public, anonymous intimacy of the omnibus versus the private, formal coldness of your aunt's home. The grimy, desperate struggle of the mudlarks on the Thames versus the whimsical, pointless archery practice in the Bloomsbury drawing room. London is a city of such stark, dizzying contradictions. It is a place of immense wealth and desperate poverty, of breathtaking progress and stubborn tradition, of public grandeur and private misery. To live here is to be in a constant state of mild whiplash. The major historical fact that underpins this feeling is the sheer, unprecedented speed of change. No society in human history had ever experienced such rapid industrialization, urbanization, and technological advancement as Victorian Britain. In the span of a single lifetime, people saw the advent of railways, the telegraph, photography, and mass production. Cities exploded in size. The old, slow, agricultural world was disappearing, replaced by something new, fast, and unsettling. This relentless pace of change created a pervasive sense of both exhilarating progress and deep-seated anxiety. It was an age of supreme confidence and profound insecurity, and you can feel both of those things warring in the city's very soul. It is difficult for scholars to fully capture the psychological impact of living through such a period of foundational disruption, where the world of one's parents was almost unrecognizable to the world of one's children. You feel it now, in the quiet of your room, a sense of standing on shifting ground, of a world that is both miraculous and terrifying. But tonight, the terror is far away. Tonight, there is only the warmth of the fire and the promise of sleep. Mind continues to drift, unmoored from the day's anxieties. You think about the faces you saw, the tired milkmaid in the morning mist, the cheerful pie man with his steaming cart, the severe bookshop owner with his ink-stained fingers, the silent, efficient housemaid at your aunt's, the fierce, defiant mudlark by the river. Each one of them is living a life as complex and detailed as your own. A full-length story that you only intersected with for a single fleeting moment. The city is a vast library of these stories, millions of them, all being written simultaneously, overlapping, intersecting, and occasionally colliding. You are just one volume on one shelf. It is a humbling, but also a strangely comforting thought. Your worries, your small triumphs, your anxieties about your umbrella, they are all just a few sentences in a much larger narrative. The fire in the grate has burned down to a bed of glowing red embers. It no longer crackles, but pulses with a soft, steady heat. The room has grown dimmer, the shadows longer and softer. You are sliding gently towards sleep, your body heavy and relaxed in a chair. You should probably get up and move to your bed, but the effort seems monumental. It is far easier to stay here, suspended in this warm, quiet moment, letting your thoughts wander where they will. You recall a strange and obscure cultural belief you once read about, the idea of the doppelganger. It was a German import, a superstition that had become popular in Gothic novels and whispered stories. The doppelganger was a ghostly, exact double of a living person. To see your own doppelganger was considered a terrible omen, a harbinger of imminent death. It was. a morbid, unsettling idea, but it spoke to a very Victorian fascination with identity, with the hidden, darker side of the self. In an age that so highly valued public respectability and conformity, the idea of a secret, spectral twin who might be out in the world, living a different, perhaps more sinister version of your life, was a powerful and terrifying fantasy. It's a concept scholars see as a reflection of the era's psychological tensions, the conflict between the polished public self and the repressed private self. You idly wonder if your own doppelganger exists somewhere out in the city tonight. You hope you remembered to bring an umbrella. It would be a shame for him to catch a chill just before your untimely demise. The thought is not frightening, just absurdly funny in your sleepy state. You let out a small, quiet chuckle. The sound is swallowed by the silence of the room. The major historical fact of this moment is your fatigue itself. The average Victorian workday, especially for the working classes, was brutally long, often 10 to 12 hours, 6 days a week. Leisure time was a new and precious commodity, hard won and easily lost. Your day of errands, while tiring, was a luxury. You had the freedom to wander, to browse, to sit in a coffee house, to visit a park. For millions of your fellow Londoners, the day was a relentless cycle of hard labor, a brief meal, and exhausted sleep, with little room for anything else. The very structure of your day, the narrative you have just lived, is a marker of your relative privilege. Your tiredness is the tiredness of a gentleman of leisure. Theirs was the deep, cellular exhaustion of the factory, the dockyard, and the workshop. You close your eyes, the warmth of the embers on your face. The distinction feels both vast and meaningless as sleep finally begins to claim you. You're asleep in your chair. The poetry book has slipped from your lap and lies face down on the floor, its verses silenced. The last of the fire's embers glow a deep, dark ruby red, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The candles have burned low, their flames sputtering in pools of liquid wax. The room is sinking into a deep and profound darkness, a soft velvety black that feels like a blanket. Outside, the city is finally quiet. The last carriage has rattled home. The last pub has closed its doors. The great roaring beast of London is for a few short hours asleep. Only the gas lamps keep their silent, lonely vigil on the empty, rain-washed streets. You dream, but they are not dramatic or frightening dreams. They are soft, disconnected images, fragments of your day, polished. Smoothed by sleep, you dream of the sound of rain on a gingham canopy, a gentle, rhythmic drumming that is both close and far away. You dream of the smell of hot pastry and savory gravy, a scent of pure, uncomplicated comfort. You see the flash of red geraniums in a window box, a vibrant, hopeful color in a world of gray. You feel the cool, smooth wood of the umbrellas, handle in your palm, a solid, dependable weight. You see the face of the clerk, his expression shifting from scorn to envy to a kind of weary acceptance. The images drift and merge, without logic or narrative, like clouds moving across a moonlit sky. Your breath is deep and even. Your body is completely at rest, the day's fatigue draining away into the quiet earth. The anxieties and small triumphs of your waking hours have dissolved. The umbrella, your companion and protagonist for the day, stands forgotten in a corner, a silent prop in a play that has ended. Its story is over. Your story for today is over. All the noise, all the striving, all the worry about what others think, all the careful navigation of social rules, it has all faded into the profound, simple peace of sleep. There's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. There are no judgments to fear, no expectations to meet. There is only this stillness, this quiet, this deep restorative rest. The first hint of dawn is still hours away. The moon, if it could be seen through the clouds, would be high in the sky. The city is dreaming its own millionfold dream around you. The river flows silently towards the sea, its surface a dark mirror reflecting the clouded sky. The great parks are empty, their lawns breathing in the cool night air. The grand buildings and the humble tenements are all equal now, shrouded in the same democratic darkness. The story is finished, the day is done. All that is left is to rest, to let go, to sink deeper and deeper into the quiet, peaceful dark. There's nothing but the gentle rise and fall of your own breathing, a steady, quiet rhythm in the sleeping heart of the great city. Sleep now, sleep well.